Revenge Girls Stories.
My name is Raisa, and I am 28 years old. Nothing prepared me for what I saw that night. My parents, Levi and Claire, both in their 70s, stood shivering outside my own front door, lips blue from the cold, while inside, my in-laws hosted an elegant dinner party with strangers. My father clutched his chest, his recent heart surgery scar hidden beneath layers that weren't enough against the freezing temperature. My mother could barely stand, her arthritis worsened by the cold. What happened next changed everything for all of us. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from. Please like and subscribe to hear how I made sure they would never hurt my family again. Growing up, my parents gave me everything they possibly could, despite our modest means. My father, Levi, worked 2 jobs for 20 years straight, his hands always rough from labor, but gentle when holding mine. My mother, Claire, stretched every dollar, making miracles happen at our dinner table, ensuring I never felt the pinch of our financial limitations. When I got accepted to college with a partial scholarship, they emptied their small savings account without hesitation. During those 4 years, they never once complained about their sacrifices. My father developed heart problems in his 60s, culminating in a triple bypass surgery just 8 months ago. His recovery had been steady but fragile, requiring daily medication and careful monitoring of his activity levels. My mother's severe rheumatoid arthritis had progressively worsened over the past decade, making simple tasks like opening doors or holding cups increasingly difficult. Despite these challenges, they maintained their independence, living in the same small ranch house where I grew up, just 15 minutes from my new home. Our family traditions remained strong, despite my busy career. Sunday dinners were sacred, and I called them daily, often on my lunch breaks. They beamed with pride at my career achievements, framing my first business card and displaying it prominently on their refrigerator. When I landed my first promotion, my father cried with joy, saying I had exceeded all his dreams for me. I met Major at an industry conference 7 years ago. He worked for a competing agency but charmed me completely during a panel discussion where we both served as speakers. His confidence and ambition mirrored my own, and our shared passion for creative marketing strategies gave us an instant connection. After exchanging business cards, we met for coffee that expanded into dinner and eventually a whirlwind romance. Within a year, we were married in a ceremony that, looking back, contained warning signs I chose to ignore. Our early marriage seemed idyllic. We supported each other's careers, celebrated wins together, and purchased a small starter condo that we spent weekends painting and furnishing. Major would make breakfast on Sunday mornings before we headed to my parents' house for dinner. In those early days, he seemed genuinely fond of my parents, bringing my father special coffees and helping my mother with household repairs. The first warning signs emerged so subtly that I dismissed them, like how Major would always take calls from his parents regardless of what we were doing, or how their opinions seemed to outweigh anyone else's, including mine. My first encounters with my in-laws, Leah and Edward, should have raised more red flags than they did. They arrived at our engagement party in matching designer outfits, surveying my parents' modest home with barely concealed disdain. Leah commented on how charming it was to see simple living in this day and age, while Edward asked my father about his investment portfolio, scoffing when Dad mentioned his pension plan. During wedding planning, they insisted on controlling aspects that traditionally belonged to the bride's family, questioning every decision I made about flowers, venue, and food. "You clearly haven't been to many proper weddings, dear," Leah told me when I selected wildflowers for my bouquet. "Let me handle this so you don't embarrass Major." Major minimized their behavior, calling his mother particular and assuring me that their intentions were good. "They just want the best for us," he would say after particularly cutting remarks. "They come from a different world." I believed him because I wanted to, convincing myself that they would warm up to me and my family over time. My career trajectory accelerated faster than Major's, though I was careful never to emphasize this fact. After 5 years of dedicated work at my marketing firm, I landed a major pharmaceutical client that transformed our agency's portfolio. My innovative campaign strategy earned me both a significant promotion and a substantial performance bonus. When I called Major with the news, his congratulations sounded genuine, but when I arrived home with champagne, I found him sullen. "Great work," he said, glass barely touched. "I guess I need to step up my game to keep up with you." I suggested using my bonus as a down payment on a house, something we had discussed theoretically but never actively pursued. The idea seemed to rejuvenate Major's mood, and he immediately called his parents to share the news. That weekend, Edward arrived with printouts of neighborhoods he deemed acceptable, all well above our planned budget. When I mentioned more affordable options, Leah patted my hand condescendingly. "This is why generational wealth matters, dear. You think small because that's what you know." Despite their interference, we found a perfect Tudor-style home in a prestigious neighborhood that was stretching our budget, but still feasible with my bonus. I contributed 70% of the down payment, a fact that Major asked me not to mention to his parents. "They just assume I'm doing well enough to handle this," he explained. "Why disappoint them?" The house represented everything I had worked for my whole life. 3 bedrooms for the family we planned to start, a home office for late-night work, and most importantly, a first-floor guest suite that would be perfect for my parents as they aged and potentially needed to stay with us. Major seemed less enthusiastic about this feature, but agreed it was practical. During their first visit to the new house, my in-laws arrived with a decorator who walked through each room, taking notes without asking our permission. Leah pointed out every flaw, from the outdated kitchen that had actually been renovated just 5 years prior to the cramped master bedroom that was twice the size of our condo bedroom. "We'll fix all this," she assured Major. "Not me. Your father knows people who can transform this place." As our housewarming party approached, I spent weeks planning a warm, intimate gathering to celebrate this milestone. I carefully selected food that my father could eat with his dietary restrictions and arranged seating to accommodate my mother's need to elevate her legs periodically. The guest list included our closest friends, my colleagues who had supported my career growth, and of course, both sets of parents. 3 days before the party, Major casually mentioned that his mother had invited a few family friends to join. When I asked for details, he vaguely mentioned some couples his parents socialized with and assured me it would only be 4 or 5 additional people. I compromised, wanting harmony more than control, but a growing uneasiness settled in my stomach as the day approached. The morning of our housewarming party dawned bright and crisp, with that perfect fall chill that makes gathering indoors feel cozy and right. I woke early, excitement bubbling as I prepared to showcase our new home. Major seemed distracted during breakfast, checking his phone repeatedly and responding with one-word answers to my questions about picking up the catering order. "My parents texted," he finally said as I loaded the dishwasher. "They're running early and might get here before the official start time. That okay?" The party was scheduled for 6 o'clock in the evening, allowing time for my parents to rest after their afternoon medications and still get home at a reasonable hour. It was currently only 10 o'clock in the morning. "How early are we talking?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Maybe around 3. They want to help set up." I bit back my initial response, reminding myself that help could be welcome with so much to do. I had planned to pick up my parents at 5:30, giving us time to get them comfortably settled before other guests arrived. "That should be fine," I replied mentally, adjusting my timeline. "Just remind them that my parents will need the accessibility accommodations we discussed." Major nodded absently, already typing a response to another incoming message. At precisely 12:45, while I was arranging a vegetable platter, the doorbell rang. I opened the front door to find Leah and Edward standing there impeccably dressed in clothing far too formal for a casual housewarming. Behind them stood 6 couples, all appearing equally overdressed, holding wrapped gifts and bottles of wine. Surprise! Leah exclaimed, stepping past me without waiting for an invitation. We thought we'd make a day of it. Everyone was so excited to see Major's new home. I stood frozen as this parade of strangers filed into my house, Leah making introductions I immediately forgot as I searched the group for Major. He emerged from our bedroom looking suspiciously well-dressed himself, greeting his parents with enthusiasm that suggested this early arrival was no surprise to him. "Darling," I whispered when I could finally pull him aside, "what's happening?" "Just a slight change of plans," he replied, straightening his tie. "Mother thought it would be nice to have a proper luncheon before the evening gathering. These are important people in my parents' circle." Before I could respond, Leah was beside us, critiquing the simple decorations I had placed around the living room. "These are charming in their way," she said, removing a handmade centerpiece my mother and I had created, "but I brought some more suitable arrangements." She snapped her fingers, and Edward carried in elaborate floral arrangements that must have cost hundreds of dollars each. Over the next hour, I watched in stunned silence as my carefully planned party transformed. Leah rearranged furniture, relegating family photos to drawers and replacing them with artistic arrangements I had never seen before. Edward's friends brought in cases of expensive wine, making dismissive comments about the selections I had purchased. "Major mentioned you were still developing your palate," one man commented as he placed my wine bottles out of sight below the bar cart. The true shock came when a catering van pulled into our driveway and 3 uniformed servers began unloading equipment I had never ordered. "We took the liberty," Edward explained when he caught my confused expression. "Your grocery store platters were thoughtful, but not quite appropriate for the guests we invited." Throughout this takeover, Major avoided me, busying himself helping his father set up an impromptu bar in our dining room or escorting newly arriving guests on tours of our home. With each passing minute, I felt increasingly like a stranger in my own house. The final straw came when I overheard Leah referring to the home as Major's new place to a woman dripping in diamonds. "We always knew he would end up in this neighborhood," she said. "Of course, there will need to be significant upgrades if they start a family. The kitchen is workable, but hardly up to standard." Edward joined them, adding, "We're discussing converting the guest suite into a proper library. Much better use of the space." The guest suite I had specifically chosen for my parents? I finally cornered Major in our bedroom, where he was inexplicably changing into an even more formal shirt. "What's happening?" I demanded. "Who are these people? Why is your mother removing our things and talking about renovation plans we never discussed?" "Rasa, you're overreacting," he said, voice low but irritated. "These are influential people who can help both our careers. Mother is just excited and maybe overstepping a bit, but it's coming from a good place." "Overstepping? Major, there are caterers in our kitchen that I didn't hire. Your mother is talking about removing the guest suite we planned for my parents. And speaking of my parents, I need to leave soon to pick them up." A flash of something like panic crossed Major's face. "About that, Mother thought it might be better if your parents came another time. This gathering has become more formal than we planned." I stared at him, ice forming in my chest. "My parents are coming. This is our housewarming, not you mother's social climbing event. I'm leaving to pick them up in 20 minutes, and I expect you to make sure they are welcomed properly." Leah appeared in the doorway as if summoned by our disagreement. "Everything all right in here? Senator Wilson is asking about your work on the Thompson campaign." "Coming, Mother," Major replied, turning from me without resolving our conversation. Before heading out, I found Major again, surrounded by his father's friends. "I'm going to get my parents now. Please remember that Dad needs easy access to his medication in the refrigerator, and Mom will need her special chair with the cushions." Sure, he nodded distractedly. "We might still be at lunch when you return. Just come around to the back patio." As I drove to my parents' house, my phone buzzed with a text from Major. Slight change of plans. We'll explain when you get back. I called immediately, but it went to voicemail. I tried again with the same result. My parents were waiting, dressed in their Sunday best. My mother had had her hair done specially for the occasion. My father proudly wore the sweater I had given him last Christmas. "The house all ready for the big reveal?" Dad asked, as I helped Mom into the car. "It looks wonderful," I lied, not wanting to worry them. "Everyone's excited to see you both." The knot in my stomach grew tighter as we drove back, my calls to Major continuing to go unanswered. When we turned onto our street, I immediately sensed something was wrong. The driveway and both sides of the street were lined with luxury vehicles I didn't recognize. A young man in what appeared to be a valet uniform stood at the end of our driveway looking confused as I pulled up. "Sorry, ma'am, the driveway's full. Are you here for the Wilson dinner?" "This is my house," I said, a chill running through me that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. The valet looked embarrassed and stepped aside, allowing me to pull into the last remaining space near the garage. Music and laughter spilled from the house, far more than the dozen or so people I had left behind. My mother looked at me confused. "My goodness, how many people did you invite, dear?" "Not this many," I admitted, helping her into the car while Dad slowly extracted himself from the passenger seat. We approached the front door, my father already breathing heavily from the short walk. The temperature had dropped significantly with the setting sun, and I noticed both my parents shivering slightly in their light jackets, appropriate for a quick transfer from car to house, but not for extended time outdoors. I rang the doorbell, hearing its chime echo inside, but no one came to answer. I rang again, then knocked firmly, watching through the beveled glass as figures moved past the entryway, clearly hearing but ignoring our presence. "Maybe they can't hear over the music," my mother suggested, pulling her jacket tighter. I knocked harder, then tried my key in the lock, only to discover it no longer worked. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Someone had changed the locks to my own home. "Let me call Major," I said, trying to keep the panic from my voice, as I dialed his number again. Straight to voicemail. I sent a text, "We're outside. The door is locked and my key is not working. Dad needs to come in now." No response. 5 minutes passed, then 10. My father, whose color was good earlier, now looked pale, and I noticed him pressing the hand to his chest in that way he did when trying to hide discomfort. "Dad, are you okay?" I asked, moving to his side. "Just a little winded," he said, but I could hear the strain in his voice. "Might need to sit down for a minute." My mother was visibly shivering now, her thin dress and jacket no match for the rapidly cooling evening. Her lips had taken on a bluish tinge that sent alarm bells ringing through my mind. "Let me try the back door," I said, helping my father to sit on the porch step before leading my mother around the side of the house. The back patio had been transformed into an extension of the party, with heat lamps warming elegantly dressed guests who sipped champagne under string lights I had never seen before. Through the large kitchen windows, I could see servers in formal attire arranging food on platters. There was no sign of Major, but Leah stood holding court near the grill, gesturing dramatically as her audience laughed on cue. I knocked on the back door. A server approached, looking annoyed at the interruption. "The entrance is around front," he said curtly. "This is a private event." "This is my house," I said, my voice rising. "My parents are freezing outside, and my father has a heart condition. Please open the door." The server looked uncertain, glancing over his shoulder toward Leah. She noticed the commotion and approached, her face darkening when she saw me. "Risa," she said through the glass, making no move to open the door. "I thought Major explained we had to make some adjustments to the guest list. This is an important dinner for Edward's business associates." "Leah, open the door right now," I demanded. "My parents are outside. It's freezing, and my father needs his medication from the refrigerator." "This really isn't a good time," she replied, having the audacity to look put out. "Perhaps you could take your parents for dinner somewhere and come back later. We should be wrapped up by 11. I stared at her in disbelief. unable to process the level of cruelty I was witnessing. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of Major, drink in hand, laughing with a group of men in the living room, completely oblivious to our situation. When I returned to the front, I found my father sitting on the step, his breathing labored, while my mother tried to rub warmth into his hands. A woman from the neighboring house approached cautiously, carrying a blanket. "Is everything all right?" she asked. "I noticed you've been out here for a while." "We're locked out," I explained gratefully, accepting the blanket and wrapping it around my mother's shoulders. "My father needs his heart medication that's inside." My father tried to wave off my concern, always one to avoid making a scene, but I could see he was in genuine distress. His medication was in the refrigerator where I had placed it specifically so it would be accessible during the party. Desperation mounting, I circled the house, looking for any point of entry. At the far side, I spotted a small basement window that was slightly ajar. It would be a tight fit, but I had no choice. "I'll be right back," I promised my parents, moving to the window and pushing it fully open. I squeezed through the opening, scraping my arm painfully on the rough frame and tearing my shirt in the process. I landed awkwardly on the basement floor, pain shooting through my ankle, but I ignored it, racing up the stairs to the main floor. I emerged from the basement into a house I barely recognized. The cozy, welcoming space I had carefully designed had been transformed into something resembling a high-end restaurant. Our furniture had been rearranged or replaced entirely with rented pieces. Servers circulated with trays of appetizers, and a bartender mixed drinks at a portable bar set up in our dining room. Without stopping to process this surreal scene, I rushed to the front door, unlocking it and throwing it open to bring my parents inside. My father's face was now alarmingly gray, and my mother couldn't stop shivering. I helped them both to the sofa, which had been pushed against the wall to make room for cocktail tables. "I'll get your medicine, Dad." I hurried to the kitchen where I found my refrigerator filled with unfamiliar food and serving platters. I located my father's medication tucked behind a tray of canapés and rushed back to him, helping him take it with trembling hands. As I tended to my parents, I became aware of the party falling silent around us. Guests staring at our small, huddled group with expressions ranging from curiosity to discomfort. Leah approached, her face tight with barely controlled anger. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" she hissed, low enough that only I could hear. "We have the governor's assistant here tonight." "Intrusion?" I stood to face her, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is my house, Leah. My house that I paid for. You locked my parents out in freezing temperatures. My father has a heart condition. Do you understand that?" There was clearly a miscommunication. Major mentioned you might bring your parents by later, but we assumed after dinner. This is an important dinner for Edward's business associates. "Leah, open the door right now," I demanded. "My parents are outside. It's freezing, and my father needs his medication from the refrigerator." "This really isn't a good time," she replied, having the audacity to look put out. "Perhaps you could take your parents for dinner somewhere and come back later. We should be wrapped up by 11. I found Major in the kitchen, drink in hand, engaged in animated conversation with 3 older men. His face dropped when he saw me, a flash of guilt quickly replaced by irritation. "Raisa, I was just telling these gentlemen about our marketing approach to healthcare clients." "My father nearly collapsed outside," I said without preamble. "Someone changed our locks. Why didn't you answer your phone?" Major glanced nervously at the men beside him. "There must have been a miscommunication. I thought we discussed your parents coming another time since the party evolved into more of a business dinner." "No, Major, we didn't discuss that. And even if we had, you let my parents stand outside in the cold for half an hour. My father's lips were blue." "You're overreacting," he muttered, guiding me away from his companions. "It can't be that cold yet. It's only October." As if to punctuate the absurdity of his statement, a commotion arose from the living room. We rushed in to find my father slumped against my mother, his face contorted in pain. "Dad," I cried, pushing past startled guests to reach him. "Chest hurts," he gasped, clutching at his shirt. My mother looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. He says it feels like his last heart attack. Without hesitation, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, giving them our address and my father's condition. Around me, the party had ground to an uncomfortable halt, guests watching the drama unfold with wine glasses still in hand. Leah appeared at Major's side, whispering furiously, "Can't this wait? You're embarrassing us in front of everyone." I whirled on her, phone still pressed to my ear. "My father might be having a heart attack because you left him in the cold. Do you understand that, Leah? He could die." Edward materialized next to his wife, his face flushed with either alcohol or anger. "Now see here, young lady, there's no need for hysterics. Your father looks fine to me, just a little winded." The paramedics arrived within minutes, pushing through the crowd of party guests to reach my father. They quickly assessed his condition, determining he was showing signs of both hypothermia and cardiac distress. As they prepared to transport him to the hospital, I heard Edward complaining to Major about the scene we were causing. I rolled in the ambulance with my parents, holding my mother's trembling hand as she watched the paramedics work on my father. The hospital emergency room received us immediately, whisking my father away for treatment, while a kind nurse helped my mother, who was also showing signs of exposure. "How long were they outside in those temperatures?" the doctor asked me after examining my father. "At least 30 minutes, I replied, shame and rage battling within me. "Maybe longer." He shook his head. "With his cardiac history and age, that was dangerously long. We'll monitor him overnight. His body temperature is still below normal, and I'm concerned about the strain on his heart." My mother was treated for mild hypothermia, given warm blankets and hot drinks until her shivering subsided. She refused to leave my father's side, so the staff brought a recliner into his room where she could rest comfortably. Around midnight, as I sat watching my parents finally sleeping peacefully, my phone rang. It was Major. "Are you coming home soon?" he asked, as if inquiring about a delayed commute rather than a family emergency. "My father is being kept overnight for observation. I'm staying with them." "The party is winding down. Your dramatic exit was quite the topic of conversation." "Dramatic exit?" I repeated, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Major, my father could have had another heart attack. Do you understand that?" "Mother says he was clearly just cold and tired. You know how your parents exaggerate their health issues for attention." Something inside me snapped at that moment. A final thread of loyalty or love or whatever had been holding our marriage together. "Major," I said, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me, "don't be there when I get home tomorrow. I mean it." "You're being irrational," he replied. "Mother and father went to a lot of trouble to arrange this dinner for my benefit, for our benefit. The least you can do is be grateful for their involvement." "Grateful? They locked my parents out of my house and nearly killed my father. Your mother rearranged our home without permission. Your father brought in strangers who treated me like staff, and you stood by and allowed all of it." "It was a misunderstanding," he insisted. "If your parents had called ahead to confirm the timing—" I hung up, unable to stomach another word of his delusional justifications. Looking at my parents, vulnerable in their hospital beds, I made a decision that would change all our lives. This would never, ever happen again. When I returned to our house the following afternoon, having secured my father's stable condition and comfortable discharge planned for the next day, I found my in-laws still there. The party debris had been mostly cleared away, presumably by the caterers, but evidence of the evening remained in the form of wine stains on our new carpet and cigarette burns on the wooden coffee table we had carefully selected together. Major sat at the kitchen island, looking haggard but defiant. Leah and Edward occupied our living room sofa, both wearing expressions of injured dignity, as if they were the wronged parties in this scenario. "Finally decided to come home, I see," Leah greeted me, her tone suggesting I had been off on a frivolous adventure rather than a family emergency. I ignored her, addressing Major directly. "How's my father doing? Did you bother to call and check?" Major had the grace to look slightly ashamed.
I figured you'd let me know if there was any change. Leah stood, smoothing her immaculate slacks. Well, now that this little drama has settled, we should discuss the dinner party. Despite your unfortunate exit, it was quite successful. Senator Wilson's aide mentioned possibly connecting Major with their media team. I stared at her, wondering if I had entered some parallel universe where human decency didn't exist. My father is in the hospital because of you, and you want to talk about networking opportunities? Now, Raisa, Edward interjected, let's maintain perspective. Your father has health problems. That's hardly our fault. If anything, you should have considered his condition before bringing him to an evening event. An evening event at my own house that I specifically planned with his needs in mind before you hijacked it. We didn't hijack anything, Leah said with an imperious wave of her hand. We simply elevated a simple gathering into something beneficial. Major agreed with our adjustments. I turned to my husband. Is that true? Did you agree to change the locks without telling me? Major shifted uncomfortably. Mother thought our security needed upgrading. I was going to give you the new keys, but with all the preparations, it slipped my mind. And the caterers, the valet, and the 40 strangers in our living room? I may have mentioned to Mother that we were having a small housewarming. She offered to help make it special. Special? I repeated, incredulity rising. Major, they took over our home, removed our personal items, and treated my parents like unwelcome intruders. How was any of that special?
Leah made a dismissive sound. Your sentimentality is charming, but impractical, dear. This house has potential to be a proper entertaining space. Those little crafts and family photos are lovely for private areas, but not for public rooms. Public rooms? This is a private home, Leah. Our home. Of course it is, dear, she replied condescendingly. But Major has always understood the importance of maintaining certain standards. His father and I have a wide social circle that can be tremendously advantageous to both of you. Did you know they were planning this? I asked Major directly. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Mother mentioned possibly hosting their annual dinner here since we have more space now. I didn't realize it would be last night. When did you know? When did you realize what they were planning? Major hesitated. When they arrived early with the first guests, but by then everything was already in motion. And you didn't think to call me, to warn me that our housewarming had turned into your parents' networking event? I knew you'd be upset, he said, as if that explained everything. The magnitude of his betrayal washed over me in waves. Not just the party, but the fundamental misalignment of our values and priorities. Who was this man who could leave his in-laws shivering in the cold while he schmoozed with strangers? Who valued his parents' social climate over basic human decency? I'm going to pack a bag, he said quietly. I can't stay here tonight. Don't be dramatic, Raisa, Leah interjected. Every marriage has adjustments. Major is simply balancing family obligations. Family obligations? Is that what you call endangering my father's life? Humiliating my mother? Taking over our home without permission? We did you a favor, Edward said, his voice hard. This house was clearly beyond your experience level. Major mentioned how you insisted on handling the decorating yourself, despite our offers to bring in professionals. As I headed upstairs to pack, I heard Leah's stage whisper to Major. Perhaps this house was too ambitious for someone of her background. There's no shame in admitting one is out of their depth. I packed quickly, taking only essentials, aware of Major watching from the doorway but making no move to stop me. As I zipped my suitcase, he finally spoke. Where will you go? To check on my parents, then to Vanessa's apartment. I replied, naming my closest friend. Don't call me unless it's an actual emergency. Leah appeared behind Major, her expression one of practiced concern. Running away never solved anything, dear.
In my experience, young wives often get overwhelmed by the responsibilities of maintaining a proper home. I walked past them both without responding, my mind already shifting from emotional hurt to strategic planning. This was no longer about a ruined party or even a betrayal of trust. My parents had been put in actual physical danger, and the casual cruelty with which my in-laws dismissed this fact revealed a toxicity I could no longer ignore. At Vanessa's apartment that evening, I broke down completely, releasing tears I had held back for my parents' sake. Between sobs, I explained the surreal sequence of events, watching her expression shift from confusion to horror. "They changed your locks?" she repeated incredulously, "without telling you, and left your parents outside?" "They act like I'm overreacting," I said, accepting the tissue she offered, like it was a simple miscommunication rather than deliberate exclusion. Vanessa, an attorney specializing in family law, shifted into professional mode. "This isn't just wrong, Raisa, it's potentially illegal. You paid for 70% of that house. They can't lock you out or make modifications without your consent." The next day brought another layer of betrayal. Checking our joint accounts online, I discovered Major had withdrawn a significant sum 3 days before the party, nearly $40,000, without discussion or notification. A call to our bank confirmed the withdrawal had been made in person with Major, citing home improvements as the purpose. The same day, I found an email receipt in our shared cloud account for catering services costing $22,000, charged to our joint credit card and addressed to Edward, not Major or me. My colleague, Olivia, who had become a close friend during my years at the marketing firm, connected me with her brother's financial advisory firm. "You need to protect yourself," she insisted. "If they'll do this, who knows what else they might try." The financial advisor confirmed my fears. Major's withdrawal had cleared out most of our liquid savings. "The good news is," he noted, "that your name is primary on the mortgage since you provided the majority of the down payment. That gives you certain rights, regardless of what happens next." Over the next few days, as my father recovered and I divided my time between the hospital and Vanessa's guest room, I discovered more evidence of my in-laws' plans. Major's sister, with whom I had always maintained a cordial, if distant, relationship, called unexpectedly. "I heard about what happened," she said, sounding genuinely concerned. "I'm so sorry. They did the same thing to my husband and me 3 years ago." She explained that Leah and Edward had a pattern of inserting themselves into their children's homes and relationships, typically after major purchases or life events. In her case, they had moved in temporarily after the birth of her first child and stayed for 8 months, gradually taking over every aspect of their household. "They convinced James that I was too overwhelmed to make decisions," she said, referring to her husband. "By the time they left, James and I were barely speaking, and I had no say in my own home." That conversation crystallized something I had sensed, but not fully articulated. This wasn't just a one-time boundary violation, but a beginning of a systematic takeover. The guest suite renovations Leah had mentioned weren't idle talk, but an actual plan, likely to create space for extended stays or even partial residency in our home. With this realization, my hurt began transitioning to something more productive, righteous anger and determination. This was no longer about saving my marriage, which honestly might be beyond repair. This was about protecting my parents, my assets, and my future from people who had demonstrated that they had no respect for my boundaries or well-being. After a week of strategic planning with Vanessa and consultations with both financial and legal advisors, I was ready to reclaim what was mine. I chose a Tuesday morning when I knew Major would be at work, arranging for a locksmith to meet me at the house with a police escort, something Vanessa had suggested given the existing lock-changing situation. "I'm the primary owner," I explained to the sympathetic officer who accompanied me. "My in-laws changed the locks without my knowledge or consent while I wasn't home." The locksmith made quick work of changing every lock and security code in the house. Inside, I discovered evidence that confirmed my suspicions.
The guest room closet contained garment bags with Leah's clothing, and the bathroom counter displayed her expensive skincare products, neatly arranged as if she planned an extended stay. More disturbing was what I found in Major's home office. A folder labeled House Modifications contained quotes from contractors for major renovations, including completely repurposing the guest suite into a library and sitting room, and plans to convert our home office into another guest room, presumably for visitors of their choosing. Most shocking was a partially completed change of address form for Edward and Leah, listing our home as their new residence. According to dates on various documents, these plans had been in motion since shortly after we closed on the house, without a single word to me. With the lock secured and evidence documented, I arranged a meeting with Major, Leah, and Edward at my attorney's office, neutral territory where emotions could be contained within professional boundaries. "This is completely unnecessary," Edward blustered as they arrived, clearly uncomfortable in the setting. "Family matters should be handled privately." "I agree," my attorney replied smoothly. "Unfortunately, when locks are changed without consent and significant sums are withdrawn without discussion, we move beyond family disagreement into potential legal territory." I had prepared a clear, factual presentation of what had occurred, from the takeover of our housewarming to the hospital bills for my father's care. As I spoke, Major's expression shifted from defensive to uncertain, while his parents remained stone-faced. The $40,000 Major withdrew has been partially accounted for through payments to caterers and event staff. The remaining funds must be returned to our joint account within 48 hours, or we'll proceed with formal legal action. "This is absurd," Leah interrupted. "Major was simply securing funds for necessary improvements to the property, improvements that would increase its value substantially." "Improvements never discussed with or approved by the primary mortgage holder," my attorney pointed out. "And as for the events of that evening, we have medical documentation of the harm caused to Raisa's father, which could potentially constitute a case for elder endangerment." That phrase landed like a bomb in the room. Elder endangerment carried serious legal and social consequences, particularly for people like Leah and Edward, who valued their community standing above all else. "There was no endangerment," Edward protested. "It was a cool evening, not the dead of winter." My attorney silently placed my father's medical report on the table, where terms like cardiac distress precipitated by exposure and hypothermic symptoms were clearly highlighted. Major, who had remained largely silent, finally spoke. "What do you want, Raisa? Just tell me what you want to resolve this." I had given this considerable thought, balancing my anger with practical considerations. First, the complete return of all funds withdrawn without mutual consent. Second, written agreement that no modifications will be made to our property without documented approval from both of us. Third, your parents will not have unsupervised access to our home under any circumstances, and any visits must be agreed upon in advance. Fourth, payment of all medical expenses incurred as a result of that night. "This is extortion," Leah hissed. "This is accountability," I corrected, "and it's non-negotiable." To everyone's surprise, including possibly his own, Major sided with me. "We'll return the money," he said quietly, "and cover the medical bills, of course." The shift in Major's position clearly shocked his parents. Edward's face flushed dark red while Leah went completely pale. "Major, you can't possibly be considering these ridiculous demands. After everything we've done for you, the connections we've provided." "You left her parents in the cold, Mother. Her father could have died. How would that have looked for your precious connections?" That meeting marked a turning point, not just in my strategy, but in Major himself. In the days that followed, as funds were returned and agreements formalized, he began individual counseling at my insistence. A therapist specializing in family dynamics helped him recognize patterns of manipulation that had defined his relationship with his parents since childhood. "They controlled everything," he told me during one of our carefully neutral coffee meetings to discuss logistics. "My schools, my friends, my career path." Anything that deviated from their vision was met with withdrawal of love and approval. I never realized how deep it went until Dr. Harrison started asking about my earliest memories of making choices. While this insight helped explain his behavior, it didn't excuse it. Trust, once shattered, couldn't be instantly restored through explanation. I maintained my separate living arrangement at Vanessa's while considering my options. The most satisfying aspect of the resolution came in the form of social and community consequences for Leah and Edward. Word of the incident spread through their carefully cultivated social circle, with my attorney's precise choice of words, elder endangerment, carrying particular weight. Invitations to key social events suddenly stopped arriving. Board positions were quietly not renewed. The currency they valued most, social standing, experienced significant devaluation. Maija's sister reached out again, this time with other siblings on the call, all sharing similar stories of boundary violations and manipulation. For perhaps the first time, they spoke openly about patterns they had individually experienced but never collectively acknowledged. This family therapy of sorts seemed to strengthen Major's resolve to establish healthier relationships with his parents. As for our marriage, it hung in a delicate balance. The core breach of trust, when Major chose his parents' wishes over my well-being and worse, over my parents' safety, had created a chasm not easily bridged. Yet his willingness to acknowledge the wrongdoing and take concrete steps toward change left the door open, if just barely, to potential reconciliation. "I understand if you want to divorce me," he said during a particularly honest conversation. "What happened is unforgivable, but I want you to know I'm committed to changing, whether we stay together or not. I never want to be that person again." I had separation papers prepared, but not filed. A contingency plan rather than an immediate intention. As Major continued therapy and maintained appropriate boundaries with his parents, I allowed myself to consider the possibility of rebuilding rather than discarding our relationship. Trust takes time, my own therapist reminded me, and it's okay to protect yourself while you evaluate whether that trust can ever be fully restored. 6 months after that fateful night, our lives had found a new pattern. My father's health had stabilized, his cardiac function returning to baseline with proper medication and care. My mother's arthritis remained challenging, but manageable, and the emotional trauma of that night had faded, though not disappeared entirely. Our house, truly my sanctuary now, had been reclaimed room by room. The guest suite remained intact, ready for my parents' visits, which occurred regularly, but always with advanced planning and clear expectations. The formal decorations Leah had installed were donated or returned, replaced by items that reflected my taste and our actual lifestyle. My career continued to flourish, with the perspective gained through personal crisis oddly enhancing my professional judgment. Priorities became clearer, and I found myself better able to distinguish between truly important matters and mere urgencies. My team noticed and responded positively to this evolved leadership style. The relationship with my parents deepened through our shared trauma and recovery. Sunday dinners resumed, now alternating between their home and mine, creating new memories to overlay the painful ones. My father, never one for deep emotional discussions, found ways to express his feelings through small gestures, like bringing me coffee prepared exactly how I liked it, or sending me articles he thought might interest me. "We never doubted you would make things right," my mother told me during one quiet moment. "Even that night, as scared as we were, we knew our daughter would fix it." Their faith in me became a source of strength I drew upon during the more difficult days of rebuilding my life. Their wisdom about forgiveness without forgetting, about setting boundaries while keeping your heart open, guided me as I navigated the complex aftermath. As for Major,
our relationship underwent its own transformation. After 3 months of separation, during which he maintained his commitment to therapy and establishing appropriate boundaries with his parents, we began the tentative process of reconciliation. This wasn't the automatic resumption of our previous marriage, but the careful construction of something new and hopefully stronger. "I've never stood up to them before," he admitted during one of our counseling sessions. "Not really. I thought I was keeping peace, finding compromises, but I was actually just avoiding conflict at all costs, including the cost of your trust and your parents' safety." The journey was neither smooth nor guaranteed. We established a detailed relationship agreement with clear expectations and boundaries, particularly regarding his parents. Leah and Edward were permitted limited, supervised contact, only with immediate consequences for any boundary violations. The first such visit was awkward and tense, but necessary to establish that the old dynamics wouldn't be tolerated. "Your home is lovely, dear," Leah said with obvious effort, the compliment foreign on her lips. "Thank you," I replied simply, neither seeking nor expecting more. They had been required, as part of our agreement, to provide financial restitution for all medical expenses related to that night. This tangible acknowledgement of harm done was non-negotiable from my perspective, regardless of any emotional reconciliation that might or might not occur. The experience transformed me in ways I never anticipated. I discovered reserves of strength I hadn't known I possessed, and learned that standing firm wasn't the same as being rigid. Setting boundaries wasn't an act of vengeance, but of self-preservation and protection for those I loved most. At work, I found myself in a natural mentorship role, particularly for younger women navigating complex professional relationships. Without sharing all the personal details, I was able to offer guidance on recognizing manipulation, setting appropriate boundaries, and advocating effectively for oneself. "You seem different," my colleague Jordan observed after a particularly challenging client meeting where I had maintained my position despite significant pressure. "More certain somehow." I learned that protecting what matters isn't selfish, it's necessary. Creating a new normal took time and intentional effort. Our home gradually became a true reflection of our values rather than a showcase or battleground. Supportive friendships like those with Vanessa and Olivia deepened through the crisis, while more superficial relationships naturally fell away. I found a healthier balance between career ambition and personal well-being, no longer measuring success solely through professional achievements. The perspective gained through nearly losing my father made crystal clear what truly mattered in life. The most profound lesson was understanding that family is defined by respect and care, not merely by blood or legal ties. The people who truly deserve a place in your life are those who honor your boundaries and value your well-being. Sometimes those people are relatives, and sometimes they're friends who become family by choice. Standing up for yourself and your loved ones isn't an act of revenge, but of necessary self-preservation. The boundaries we create protect love rather than diminish it, creating safe spaces where genuine relationships can flourish without manipulation or fear. When crisis strikes, it reveals the true character and priorities of everyone involved. This painful clarity, while initially devastating, ultimately provides the information needed to build a life aligned with authentic values rather than external expectations.
Looking forward, I focus on creating a future built on genuine respect and mutual care. The journey has been difficult but necessary, and I carry forward not bitterness, but wisdom, not anger, but discernment about who deserves a place in my inner circle. The social consequences for Leah and Edward continued to unfold in ways that were both satisfying and instructive. Their carefully constructed social empire began crumbling as word spread through their elite circles. The term elder endangerment carried particular weight in their community, where maintaining appearances and social standing were paramount. Within weeks of our legal meeting, I began hearing reports from various sources about their declining social status. The country club where Edward had served on the board for 15 years quietly suggested he step down. Leah's position as chair of the annual charity gala was reassigned due to scheduling conflicts. Dinner invitations that had once been abundant suddenly became scarce. Most telling was when Major's sister called to report that their parents' annual New Year's Eve party, traditionally the social event of their calendar, had been poorly attended. "Only about 20 people showed up," she said with barely concealed satisfaction, and most of those were people who probably hadn't heard about what happened yet. The financial restitution they were required to pay also served as a constant reminder of their actions. Every month, as they wrote checks for my father's ongoing cardiac care and my mother's additional physical therapy sessions, they were forced to confront the real consequences of their cruelty. "They look older," Major observed after one of their supervised visits to our home. "Smaller somehow, like all that arrogance was actually holding them up." Indeed, without their social standing and the deference it commanded, Leah and Edward seemed diminished. The commanding presence they had once wielded was replaced by an uncomfortable awareness that their actions had genuine consequences. Major's transformation continued to evolve through consistent therapy and genuine commitment to change. He began recognizing patterns not just in his relationship with his parents, but in how he had approached conflict throughout his life. The people-pleasing behaviors that had seemed like diplomacy were revealed as avoidance mechanisms that ultimately harmed the people he claimed to love most. I spent so much energy trying to keep everyone happy that I forgot to consider whether what I was doing was actually right. It's like I was playing some elaborate game where the rules were always changing and I never stopped to ask if I even wanted to be playing. Our marriage counseling sessions became less about whether we would stay together and more about how to build something genuinely healthy. We established new traditions that reflected our actual values rather than external expectations. Sunday dinners with my parents became sacred again, but now Major participated as a genuine member of our family rather than a reluctant observer. The guest suite renovation that Leah had planned never materialized. Instead, we transformed it into a comfortable space where my parents could stay for extended visits when needed. My father's recovery had been complete, but both he and my mother appreciated having the option of staying overnight after medical appointments or during inclement weather. "This is what a real family feels like," my mother observed during one such visit, watching Major help my father with his physical therapy exercises. "People taking care of each other because they want to, not because they have to." The impact extended beyond our immediate family circle. Major's siblings, emboldened by our successful boundary setting, began establishing their own limits with their parents. His brother refused to host Thanksgiving after Leah attempted to invite additional guests without consulting him. His youngest sister moved across the country and limited contact to monthly phone calls with specific time boundaries. For the first time in their adult lives, all of Major's siblings were communicating regularly with each other, rather than just serving as individual satellites orbiting their parents' demands. They created a group chat where they could support each other in maintaining boundaries and share strategies for dealing with manipulation attempts. It's like we're finally becoming actual siblings instead of just competitors for our parents' approval, Major Sister told me during a rare visit where all the siblings gathered without their parents for the first time in over a decade. The professional consequences of my experience proved equally valuable. My enhanced ability to recognize manipulation and maintain boundaries served me well in client relationships and business negotiations. I found myself naturally gravitating toward mentoring younger employees, particularly women who were struggling with similar boundary issues in their personal or professional lives. You have this way of helping people see clearly without making them feel judged, my colleague Sarah mentioned after I had helped her navigate a difficult situation with a demanding client. It's like you've been where we are and found a way through. I began speaking at women's professional organizations about the importance of boundary setting in both personal and business contexts. Without sharing the specific details of my family crisis, I was able to offer practical strategies for recognizing manipulation, protecting assets, and maintaining professional relationships while safeguarding personal well-being. The speaking engagements led to consulting opportunities with companies struggling with workplace dynamics and toxic leadership patterns. My experience had taught me to identify systemic issues that create environments where boundary violations become normalized. Raisa has an unusual ability to see through surface behaviors to underlying power structures, noted the CEO of a company where I had consulted on improving their management culture. She helped us understand how our family-like workplace culture was actually enabling some pretty harmful dynamics. The most powerful realization that emerged from this entire experience was understanding that true strength isn't about avoiding conflict, but about standing firm when your core values are threatened. The night my parents were left outside in the cold became a defining moment, not just because of what happened, but because of how I chose to respond. 2 years later, as I write this story, our lives have stabilized into something genuinely healthy. Major and I rebuilt our marriage on a foundation of honest communication and mutual respect, rather than conflict avoidance and family obligation. The process wasn't easy, and there were moments when I questioned whether reconciliation was possible or even wise. The person I was that night isn't who I want to be, Major said during one of our final counseling sessions. I can't undo what happened, but I can make sure it never happens again. That's not just a promise to you, it's a promise to myself. His commitment proved genuine over time. When Leah attempted to plan our first anniversary celebration without consulting us, Major immediately shut down the conversation. When Edward suggested we might want to consider a more suitable neighborhood as our careers progressed, Major made it clear that all major decisions will be made by us alone, without outside input or pressure. The boundaries we established weren't just protective, they were liberating. Without the constant stress of managing his parents' expectations and manipulations, Major became more relaxed, more creative in his work, and more present in our relationship. I realized I had never truly known the person he could be when freed from their influence. My parents' recovery was complete, both physically and emotionally. The experience had shaken them, but it also strengthened our bond and their confidence in my ability to protect them. They began sharing stories from their own lives about times when they had to stand up to difficult people or situations, wisdom they had gained through decades of experience. "You handled that better than we would have at your age," my father told me during one of our Sunday dinners. "We're proud of how you fought for us, but more than that, we're proud of how you fought for what's right." The house became truly ours, a space that reflected our values and priorities rather than anyone else's expectations. We renovated the kitchen to be more accessible for my parents' visits and created a small garden where my mother could tend to flowers despite her arthritis. These changes were made by choice, not imposed by others. Professionally, the experience transformed my approach to leadership and client relationships. I developed a reputation for being someone who could navigate difficult personalities and complex power dynamics while maintaining integrity. Companies began seeking my consultation specifically for situations involving toxic workplace cultures or problematic leadership. Raisa has this ability to see through manipulation tactics that others miss, one client noted. She helped us identify patterns we didn't even realize were damaging our team dynamics. The speaking engagements evolved into a broader platform for discussing boundary setting, family dynamics, and protecting vulnerable family members. Without exploiting my personal story, I was able to offer practical guidance to others facing similar challenges. Most importantly, I learned that revenge isn't about punishment. It's about justice and protection. What I did wasn't driven by a desire to hurt Leah and Edward, but by a determination to ensure they could never hurt my family again. The social and financial consequences they faced were natural results of their actions, not vindictive attacks. The boundaries I established protected not just my parents and myself, but ultimately everyone involved. Leah and Edward were forced to confront the reality that their behavior had genuine consequences, something that might actually help them develop healthier relationships with their other children and grandchildren. "They're different now," Major Sister observed during a recent family gathering. "Still difficult, but they seem to understand that we won't tolerate being treated badly. It's like they finally learned that actions have consequences." For anyone facing similar situations, my advice is clear. Trust your instincts when you feel something is wrong. Don't minimize red flags or excuse harmful behavior because it comes from family members. The people who truly love you will respect your boundaries, not constantly test them. Document everything, protect your assets, and don't be afraid to seek professional help, legal, financial, and emotional. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for everyone involved is to establish firm consequences for unacceptable behavior. Most importantly, remember that you don't owe anyone access to your life, your home, or your family just because of blood relationships or social expectations. True family is built on respect, care, and mutual support, not obligation, manipulation, or fear. Standing up for yourself and your loved ones isn't selfish, it's necessary. The boundaries you create today protect not just your current well-being, but your future happiness and the safety of everyone you care about. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who crossed your boundaries? What did you learn from the experience? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences and lessons learned. And remember, sharing these stories helps others recognize and address similar situations in their own lives. Thank you for being here with me through this journey. Stay strong, set healthy boundaries, and protect what truly matters.